You've been taught that danger looks like violence, chaos, or open hostility. But Carl Jung discovered a more terrifying truth. The greatest psychological threats do not come from outside. They arise in the very patterns of perception and connection you carry within. It isn't the enemy with weapons who destroys you. It's the unseen environment of the mind, the silent parasite of the psyche, the trap you enter daily without noticing. Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And what he meant was this: the most destructive forces in your life don't announce themselves with alarms. They appear as love that drains you, as loyalty that suffocates you, as beliefs that feel safe but secretly shrink your mind. Think of it this way: the empath who gives endlessly isn't weak. They are in the most dangerous position of all, because their light becomes food for those who cannot bear their own darkness. The rare personality who questions everything isn't simply difficult. They carry the burden of advanced consciousness in a world built for conformity. And the person who loses all motivation after awakening isn't failing. They've stepped into the paradox Jung called the nigredo, where the old self dies but the new has not yet been born. This is not about abstract theory. Jung saw patients unravel when these forces took hold. He saw families destroyed by shadow projections that rewrote reality. He saw gentle souls snap into terrifying clarity when betrayal shattered their illusions. He saw how environments and relationships could literally rewire a mind until it no longer recognized itself. And now, I want to take you on that same descent, to show you the hidden places Jung mapped, the echo chambers that atrophy thought, the parasites that devour compassion, the awakenings that feel like annihilation, and the shadows that rise when ignored too long. By the end, you will not only recognize these dangers, you will see the escape routes Jung left as secret doorways to freedom. Because the danger is real, but so is the possibility of transformation. Here is the paradox Jung uncovered. You are never more vulnerable than when you believe you finally see clearly. Vision itself can be a trap. The empath thinks their compassion is salvation, but Jung warned that their very gift can become the noose by which unconscious others hang them. The seeker believes awakening will fill them with energy, but Jung discovered it more often strips life of meaning until nothing feels worth doing. The rare personality treasures their intensity only to find society calls it too much and quietly tries to smother it. Why does this matter now? Because we live in the most amplified hall of mirrors in human history. Every projection is broadcast, every wound amplified, every persona rewarded. Social networks reward masks, workplaces exploit sensitivity, relationships disguise parasitism as love. Jung saw this pattern in his Zurich patients in the early 20th century. You see it in every scrolling feed today. The difference is scale. What once destroyed a family can now destabilize entire communities. And Jung's voice, written in fragments across his notebooks, sounds almost prophetic. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What he meant was this: without recognizing the shadow at play in your own life, you will repeat the cycle endlessly. You'll confuse depletion for devotion, manipulation for intimacy, certainty for truth. This isn't just about protecting your mind, it's about survival of the psyche itself. Because the mind that cannot detect shadow is doomed to be ruled by it. And the soul that cannot endure the emptiness of awakening will trade its freedom for another cage. So the stakes are nothing less than this: whether you become sovereign in your own consciousness or remain a host for forces you don't even realize are feeding on you. Carl Jung once wrote that the persona, the mask we wear to meet society, was not inherently evil, but profoundly dangerous when mistaken for the whole self. He observed that the more a person identifies with this mask, the more their shadow grows unseen in the unconscious. In his day, The persona was shaped by family expectations, church pews, professional uniforms. In our age, it has metastasized into the digital mask, a curated feed, a comment tone, a filter of endless self-presentation. Why is this mask so perilous now? Because the modern world rewards it. Platforms are built to elevate image over essence, applause over authenticity. The more perfectly you manage impressions, the more the algorithm rewards you. Because the algorithm is blind to truth, therefore the false face flourishes. But every reward given to the mask is energy stolen from the authentic self. Jung warned, the persona is a compromise between individual and society as to what a man should appear to be. Appear to be, not actually be. And here lies the trap. The thicker the mask, the greater the hunger of the shadow. The unconscious begins leaking through tiny cracks, not in grand confessions, but in what Jung would call feeling-toned complexes, microsignals that betray the truth. An extra beat before answering a challenge, a defensive wall of words, a suspiciously quick deletion of a comment. Think of it. People believe they are hiding their character behind a polished profile, but their real self bleeds through in the smallest cues, the sudden silence, the disproportionate anger, the endless need to control narrative. These are not accidents. They are the unconscious erupting in ways the mask cannot contain. Jung understood that the persona is never sustainable as the sole identity. Because what is suppressed in shadow does not disappear, it accumulates. Therefore, the online persona machine is not just a stage for performance, it is a factory producing shadow eruptions. Every tweet, every story, every performance of self tightens the pressure. And when rupture comes, it does not reveal the mask. It reveals the monster beneath. So if you want to see someone's true character, do not stare at the mask. The mask was designed to be admired. Watch instead the moments of friction, the cracks in the machine. Because there, Jung would tell you, the unconscious is speaking. Jung insisted that psychology must be practical. It is not enough to name the shadow, one must have instruments sharp enough to detect it. And after decades of watching masks rise and fall, he reduced the chaos to two decisive signals. If you wish to see through the online persona machine, you must watch for exactly two things. The first is what I call the rupture response, the moment when reality collides with the mask. This is the split second after critique, boundary, or contradiction. Jung noted that the shadow is most often seen in projection, and it is in rupture that projection bursts forth. Do they lash out with sarcasm? Do they drown you in words? Do they vanish into silence while proclaiming moral superiority? The rupture is a crack in the mirror, and through it you glimpse the hidden figure behind the polished face. The second is what I call the repair capacity, the hours and days after the rupture. This is the deeper test, because masks can sometimes endure a single blow, but true character is revealed in how one returns. Jung believed individuation required the capacity to integrate contradictions, to confess, to restore connection. Therefore, the repair is the laboratory where wholeness, or hollowness, is proven. Do they acknowledge harm? Do they realign words with deeds? Do they return with greater clarity, or double down with greater distortion? These two, rupture response and repair capacity, form what I call the 24-72-hour test of character. They reveal more than 1,000 bios, more than years of carefully curated impressions. Because the unconscious cannot fake friction, and it cannot fake humility. So here is the paradox. You do not see a person most clearly in their self-presentation. You see them in their fractures, not in their confidence, but in their contradiction, not in their polish, but in their pause. Jung would remind you, the mask exists to deceive, but the psyche under strain cannot help but reveal itself. Therefore, watch the rupture, watch the repair. Together they tell you everything. Jung observed that the psyche under pressure reveals its secret architecture. When the mask fractures, the unconscious steps forward, uninvited. He called this the autonomous complex, a pocket of shadow material that seizes control of behavior in moments of conflict. Online, this is what I name the rupture response. It is the unguarded first reaction when someone meets resistance, boundary, or contradiction. The rupture is not random. It follows patterns Jung mapped in his case studies, patterns that are alive and visible in digital spaces today. Let me show you 4 of them. Type 1. The deflect and perform. Instead of meeting the challenge directly, they respond with sarcasm, memes, or jokes meant to belittle. Jung warned that humor can be a mask for hostility, a displacement of aggression that reveals more than it conceals. They think they are deflecting, but they are confessing, "I cannot bear truth, so I will perform instead." Type 2. The control and contain. Here the rupture takes the form of authoritarian language, quoting rules, appealing to policies, weaponizing objectivity to silence difference. Jung recognized this as inflation, the ego identifying with a role larger than itself, the judge or truth-bearer. But behind the posture of control is terror of losing the narrative. Type 3. The flood and blur. These individuals unleash walls of text, shifting topics, moving goalposts. It is a psychological smokescreen. Jung described this in projection cases. When the unconscious is cornered, it multiplies narratives so quickly that clarity becomes impossible. But this very chaos is diagnostic. It signals that the mask is cracking and the psyche is scrambling for cover. Type 4. The ice and exit. They vanish, not in humility, but in cold superiority. They ghost, block, or withdraw while proclaiming themselves above the fray. Jung called this negative inflation, the saintly mask that hides contempt. The silence is not peace, it is punishment. Notice the thread. Each rupture response reveals the disowned self. The sarcastic performer hides rage. The authoritarian hides insecurity. The flooder hides fear of exposure. The cold saint hides resentment. Jung insisted that everything that irritates us about others can lead to an understanding of ourselves. The rupture is that mirror, showing exactly what a person cannot yet integrate. And here lies the danger. Because rupture often feels convincing, the sarcastic joke can make the audience laugh. The authoritarian tone can silence opposition. The flood of words can confuse witnesses. The silent withdrawal can look like wisdom. But Jung's clinical eye reminds us these are not signs of strength. They are symptoms of shadow seizure. Therefore, if you want to see character, do not ask how they behave when applauded. Ask how they respond when contradicted. The rupture is the tell, and the tell is everything. Jung wrote that the meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But he also knew that transformation is not measured in the heat of the reaction. It is measured in the cooling afterward. This is what I call the repair capacity, the ability of a person to return to reality after rupture. Anyone can erupt. The shadow is strong, the ego fragile, but only the individuated self can repair. Jung saw this in his Zurich clinic again and again. Patients who could name their projection, who could circle back after conflict with humility, often grew stronger than before. Patients who could not, who defended, denied, or rewrote the story, remained trapped in endless repetition. What then are the marks of true repair? 4 stand out. First, temporal humility. The wise psyche knows it cannot resolve everything in the storm. Those who say, "I need a day to think, I'll return," are not weak. They are proving that time itself is their ally. Jung recognized that distance cools complexes. Without pause, the unconscious controls every word. Second, specific accountability. Watch for the language of detail. Here is the line I crossed. This sentence was unfair. I dismissed your perspective. Jung insisted that individuation means integration of shadow content, not vague apologies, but precise recognition of the denied fragment. Third, relational attunement. They ask, what would make this right for you, rather than demanding you accept their version of repair. This reflects what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold both sides until a third way emerges. It is not surrender, it is synthesis. Fourth, behavioral update. The ultimate proof is change. A creator adjusts their description. A colleague rewrites the process log. A partner stops repeating the same wound. Jung knew that psyche is embodied. Without new action, words are only another mask. Why is this capacity so decisive? Because repair requires the death of ego. The ego must admit fault, integrate shadow, endure humiliation, and still return. That is why Jung considered repair one of the highest achievements of the human soul. He saw it as the path to individuation itself, the ability to fall apart and then reform with greater wholeness. Here lies the paradox. Rupture exposes the shadow, but repair proves the self. You do not know who someone is by their first response, you know them by their second. The rupture shows you the wound, the repair shows you the healer. Jung never tired of tracing the chain of cause and effect that binds the psyche. He would say, because, therefore, and in that sequence, reveal inevitability. The mechanism behind rupture and repair follows this same inexorable logic. Because the persona is designed for applause, therefore it collapses under friction. It cannot withstand contradiction, for contradiction exposes its artificiality. This is why online masks crack so easily. The environment rewards performance, but offers no scaffolding for truth. Because the rupture seizes the psyche with autonomous complexes, therefore the shadow bursts forth in projection. Sarcasm, control, flooding, or cold withdrawal are not choices in the ordinary sense. They are compulsions, eruptions of the unintegrated unconscious. The person believes they are acting freely, but in truth, they are possessed. Because repair requires integration, therefore, it becomes the truest test of character. Only the self, not the mask, can admit error. Only the individuated psyche can bow low enough to acknowledge, I was wrong, and still stand tall in dignity. Jung recognized this as the paradox of growth. Humility strengthens, denial weakens. And because repair is so rare, therefore rupture alone is not enough to judge character. Anyone can be overtaken by shadow in the moment. The decisive question is, do they return? Do they metabolize the shadow into consciousness? Do they emerge wiser, or do they double down in distortion? Here we see the inevitable conclusion. Rupture reveals the raw material of the psyche, but repair reveals its alchemy. In rupture we see the iron ore, dense, chaotic, unrefined. In repair we see whether that ore can be smelted into gold. Jung wrote that the gold is in the dark. This mechanism explains why. The dark of rupture delivers the substance, but the gold appears only through repair. Theory is nothing if it cannot be traced in lived experience. Jung never spoke in abstractions alone. He returned again and again to the case study, the lived moment where shadow erupts and self is tested. Let me give you 3 such mirrors, drawn from the digital agora where persona is loudest. The creator and the comment. A young artist posts their work online. A viewer critiques the piece as derivative. The creator has 2 possible paths. One replies with venom, "You've never created anything worthwhile yourself." That is rupture with no repair, shadow lashing out. Another, after a night's pause, responds, "I see what you mean. I was echoing influences more than I realized. I've updated the description to give credit." That is repair capacity. Ego wounded, but the self alive enough to learn. Which one has character? Not the one who never cracked, but the one who cracked and returned with clarity. The team and the thread. In a workplace chat, a decision is questioned. One leader insists they are just following procedure, shutting down dialogue. That is persona inflated, hiding behind policy. Another takes 24 hours, then posts, "I reread our process. You're right, it excluded key voices. I've added a review step." Jung would call this individuation in action. The shadow admitted, the psyche expanded. The first leader reveals rigidity, the second reveals growth. The lover and the boundary. In private messages, a partner says, "I need space tonight." The rupture response appears immediately, silence followed by guilt-laden texts, accusations of rejection. This is the autonomous complex seizing the strings. But another partner breathes, waits, and the next day says, "I noticed my fear of abandonment flared. That was mine, not yours. Thank you for being honest." Here, repair transforms not only the relationship, but the soul itself. Jung would name it the transcendent function, the capacity to hold the opposites of fear and love until a third way emerges. Each of these cases teaches the same principle. The rupture is unavoidable, but the repair is optional. Shadow will always break the surface, but whether it is integrated or projected, that is the proof of character. And so Jung's warning rings again. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These field examples are not trivial. They are fate condensed into dialogue boxes and comment threads. They show us who is destined to repeat and who is prepared to evolve. Jung believed that the unconscious reveals itself in patterns so consistent they could be mapped like constellations. He called them archetypes, recurring structures of psychic life. In the online world, rupture responses fall into their own archetypal styles. Each reveals not just a defense, but a secret wound. Let me give you 4 of the most telling. Type A, the prosecutor. Armed with screenshots, timestamps, and moral outrage, this figure wages trial by evidence. They must prove you guilty, not because they seek truth, but because their own shadow cannot bear ambiguity. Jung saw this inflation often in patients who identified with the archetype of the judge, self-appointed guardians of righteousness. Their rupture is driven by terror. If they are not right, they are nothing. Type B, the ghost saint. This is the one who vanishes with a halo. They refuse dialogue, withdraw contact, and then broadcast a narrative of purity. I left the drama behind. But Jung would call this negative inflation. The saint mask hides seething resentment. Silence here is not transcendence, but disguised punishment. Type C, the flooder. They overwhelm you with verbiage, paragraph after paragraph, shifting topics, exhausting your energy. Jung observed this in projection cases when a patient's unconscious, cornered, unleashed torrents of associations to drown the tension. The flood is not clarity, it is camouflage. Type D, the mirror. Rarest of all, this style meets rupture with reflection. They pause, acknowledge, and then say, "This part was mine, that part was yours. Here's how we go forward." Jung would recognize this as the self in action, the archetype of the mediator, who can hold the tension of opposites until synthesis is born. This type does not collapse into shadow, but integrates it. Notice the progression. A accuses, B abandons, C overwhelms, D integrates. 3 styles externalize shadow, 1 transforms it. Jung warned that without integration, these patterns repeat endlessly, each rupture becoming another loop of fate. But the mirror reveals what individuation makes possible, a response where both people emerge changed, not diminished. So when you watch the online stage, ask yourself, which archetype are you encountering? The prosecutor who must condemn, the ghost saint who must disappear, the flooder who must confuse, or the mirror who dares to repair? The answer tells you not only who they are, but whether you should stay or step away before the pattern consumes you. Jung often said that character is not proven in the first impulse, but in what follows once the storm has passed. The unconscious will always erupt, The question is whether the conscious self can return and integrate. This is why I call the 24-72-hour window the decisive test of human integrity. Here is how it works. Step 1. Timestamp the rupture. Mark the moment of friction, the insult, the boundary, the contradiction. Jung would tell you, do not dismiss it, for it is the entry wound where the shadow breaks through. Step 2. Log the first response. Was it sarcasm, silence, control, or a flood of justification? That is the shadow's reflex. It tells you what has been disowned. Step 3. Wait a sleep cycle. Jung knew the psyche works through dreams and nights of rest. Give it 1 to 3 days. During this time, ego defenses weaken and deeper integration becomes possible. Step 4. Assess the repair. Do they return with humility? Do they acknowledge specifics rather than offering vague apologies? Do they modify behavior in a way that proves consciousness has expanded? If yes, you are witnessing individuation in progress. If no, you are facing a fixed complex that will repeat endlessly. Step 5. Decide access. Jung advised that one cannot change another who refuses integration. Your task is not to rescue, but to discern. If repair is present, connection may deepen. If absent, distance is protection. Why is this window so revealing? Because the psyche cannot fake it for long. In the heat of the moment, anyone can stumble. But in the cool of 24 to 72 hours, those who are truly whole will circle back. Those who are fragmented will defend, distort, or disappear. So the law is simple. Do not judge character by how someone shines when applauded. Judge by how they return after rupture. The mask wins followers. The repair wins trust. And trust, Jung would remind us, is the only foundation upon which any genuine relationship can endure. Jung taught that individuation is not achieved through grand declarations, but through daily dialogue, how you speak, how you set limits, how you restore connection. If rupture is inevitable and repair the true test of the self, then we must learn the language of conscious repair. Without it, you fall into either silence that punishes or explanations that exhaust. With it, you create a container where shadow can be named without domination. Let me give you 3 scripts that embody this practice. Script 1. Naming the fracture. Instead of lashing out or withdrawing, you say, I noticed I reacted strongly here. That part is mine. I'd like to understand yours. This separates shadow from self. Jung believed that when we claim our projection, we remove its poison. Script 2. Inviting pause without abandonment. You say, I need 24 hours to think clearly. I will return tomorrow. This is temporal humility. It prevents escalation while proving commitment. Jung would call it a conscious withdrawal, not a ghosting. Script 3. Establishing boundaries with dignity. You say, I can continue if we keep sarcasm out of this. If not, I will step back. This sets a condition without cruelty. Jung insisted that boundaries are not barriers. They are the frame that makes relationship possible. But scripts alone are not enough. You must also practice what I call the boundary ladder, a graduated response system that mirrors Jung's principle of proportionality. Begin with a gentle correction. If ignored, move to private clarity. If still violated, provide a written record, an email, a message. If the pattern persists, step back temporarily. If all else fails, sever contact without malice. This ladder ensures you neither collapse into endless self-sacrifice nor explode into total severance at the first sign of rupture. It is the middle way Jung sought, the transcendent function in relationship, holding tension until clarity emerges. Because here is the truth. Conscious repair does not mean tolerating abuse. It means offering pathways to integration while refusing to carry another's shadow for them. You extend a hand, but you do not let yourself be dragged into the abyss. Jung reminded us that every advance toward individuation carries its own dangers. The same insight that liberates can also entrap if misapplied. In the realm of rupture and repair, there are 3 pitfalls that ensnare even the most well-intentioned seekers. Pitfall 1. Instant exile. The moment conflict arises, you cut off. You call it protecting your peace, but often it is avoidance disguised as strength. Jung would name this negative inflation, the saintly persona that withdraws, not from wisdom, but from fear of shadow. The result is not sovereignty, but isolation. Pitfall 2. Endless coaching. You take on the role of therapist, mentor, or savior, explaining and re-explaining to someone who has no intention of repairing. Jung warned against this form of unconscious sacrifice, the helper archetype inflated into martyrdom. What begins as compassion decays into collusion, keeping both parties trapped in repetition. Pitfall 3. Outcome attachment. You demand that repair must end in reconciliation, that closure must be granted on your terms. Jung called this the tyranny of the ego, which cannot accept that integration may mean distance, even permanent separation. Real repair is not control of outcome, but clarity of self. The antidote to each pitfall lies in awareness. Exile can be softened by proportionality. Try the latter before the guillotine. Coaching can be replaced by reciprocity. Offer once, then step back. Outcome attachment can be dissolved by humility. Accept that the work of repair is to cleanse your side of the field, not to till another's soil. Remember this: individuation does not guarantee harmony with everyone. It guarantees harmony within yourself. To demand more is to fall back into shadow. Jung often spoke of the psyche leaving traces, symbols, slips, subtle echoes through which the unconscious betrays itself. Once you have learned to watch rupture and repair, you can move deeper, reading what I call the meta-signals. These are not the words themselves, but the patterns surrounding them. They reveal character with an accuracy almost clinical. First, the edit trail. Does the person revise, delete, or annotate past statements? Jung would remind us, the ego that can update its own narrative is an ego in dialogue with the self. Silence over mistakes is a defense. Visible correction is individuation in progress. Second, audience regulation. Notice how they manage their communities. Do they allow cruelty to flourish in their comment sections, excusing it as free speech? Or do they set boundaries that protect human dignity? Jung believed the outer field mirrors the inner field. If they cannot hold a healthy container around them, they have not yet built one within. Third, disconfirming evidence. The most trustworthy people are those who present facts that weaken their own position. Jung saw this as a mark of true consciousness, the capacity to hold contradictions without collapse. When someone surfaces data that undermines their argument, they are revealing that truth matters more to them than persona. Fourth, costly signals. Do they ever accept a personal loss, money, reputation, convenience, to uphold principle? Jung knew that shadow is exposed when the ego is threatened. Therefore, the person who sacrifices for truth has proven that self rules them more than social survival. These signals cannot be faked for long, because they are not about intention, but pattern. The mass can craft eloquent posts, but only the individuated can consistently update, regulate, disconfirm, and sacrifice. So the advanced reader does not just ask, what did they say? They ask, what did they edit? What did they allow? What did they undermine in themselves? What did they lose to remain whole? In these meta-signals, the shadow is not only revealed, it is measured, and where the shadow is measured, the self can be trusted. Jung believed knowledge without practice becomes another mask. To see the unconscious at work, you must train the eye and strengthen the heart. Let me give you a practical laboratory so the insights of rupture and repair are not abstractions, but living discernments in your daily life. Exercise 1. The 3 threads. Scroll through a discussion online. Choose 3 comment threads where tension arose. Do not focus on the polished arguments. Watch instead for the rupture. Who became sarcastic, authoritarian, chaotic, or cold? Then return after a day. Did anyone come back with acknowledgement, with clarity, with changed tone? record what you saw. This is the 24-72-hour test in real time. Exercise 2. The Mirror Journal. Each evening ask yourself, what was my rupture today? Perhaps it was the quick dismissal in a meeting, the sigh at a partner's request, the silence when you wish to speak. Write it without judgment, then ask, what could my repair be tomorrow? Jung would call this active imagination with the shadow, bringing it to dialogue rather than denial. Exercise 3. The Projection Spotter. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When you feel disproportionate anger toward another online, pause. Ask, what of myself am I projecting here? The awareness itself loosens the grip of the complex. Exercise 4. The Boundary Rehearsal. Before the next conflict, practice aloud. I need a day to think. I will return. Say it until it feels natural. This prepares you to resist the pull of instant rupture and to hold yourself in the container of time. Exercise 5. The Audit of Circles. Map your digital and personal relationships. Who shows rupture without repair? Who shows both? Jung warned that your psyche is shaped by the fields you inhabit. The presence of mirrors strengthens you. The presence of flutters, prosecutors, or ghost saints drains you. Adjust accordingly. Through these practices, you will discover something subtle but profound. That discernment itself is an initiation. The very act of watching rupture and repair reshapes your own. You cannot track the shadow in others without awakening the self in yourself. And so the lab is not external. It is your own life, your own speech, your own return. Jung's teaching comes alive not in libraries, but in conversations, in comments, in conflicts where truth is tested. Jung warned that the psyche is not a private island. It is the thread upon which the world itself hangs. The world hangs on a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man, he wrote. When rupture dominates without repair, that thread frays, not just in families, but in nations, in digital cultures, in the collective unconscious itself. Look at our present age, a civilization addicted to rupture, outrage cycles, call-outs, endless polarizations. Each new fracture becomes spectacle, not invitation to integration. Persona machines reward conflict while repair is invisible, unrewarded, unseen. Therefore, our culture learns only to rupture, never to return. But Jung's vision was larger. He saw that every individual who integrates shadow adds weight to the collective balance. One empath who stops being a sponge becomes a mirror that forces manipulators to face themselves. One rare personality who refuses to dim their intensity becomes a signal fire for others who thought they were alone. One seeker who endures the emptiness of awakening rather than retreating into illusion creates a model of authentic purpose that ripples outward. Thus, the stakes are not simply personal. Your capacity to rupture consciously and repair honestly is cultural medicine. It teaches a community what is possible. It models to a society what strength without cruelty and humility without collapse can look like. And here lies the paradox that brings us full circle. The Internet is not merely a theater of masks. It is also the greatest collective training ground Jung could have imagined. Every rupture online is an initiation. Every repair is a micro-act of individuation that strengthens not only you, but the culture you inhabit. The question then is no longer, will rupture come? It always will. The question is, who among us will dare to repair? We began with the mask, the online persona machine, the polished face that demands applause. But Jung taught us that masks conceal as much as they reveal, and that what is hidden will eventually break through. That breakthrough is the rupture, the sudden flash of shadow. Yet rupture is not the end. It is only the invitation. The decisive proof of character comes in the repair, in the return after the storm. Remember the sequence. The rupture shows you the wound. The repair shows you the healer. The absence of repair shows you the prison of shadow. We trace the typology, the prosecutor who must condemn, the ghost saint who withdraws in icy superiority, the flutter who buries you in chaos, and the mirror who dares to reflect and repair. We practiced the 24-72-hour test. We learned scripts and boundaries that make repair possible without self-erasure. We named pitfalls, instant exile, endless coaching, outcome attachment, and their antidotes. We learned to read meta-signals, edit trails, audience regulation, disconfirming evidence, costly signals. And we saw that each act of conscious repair is not just personal, it is cultural medicine. So let us return to the paradox with which we began. The danger is not that you cannot read people online. The danger is that you can, but refuse to take responsibility for what you see, because to see and not to act is to collude with shadow. Therefore, your task is clear. Watch the rupture, watch the repair. Apply the 24-72-hour test. Journal your own fractures and your own returns. Share in the comments not the persona you wish to project, but the repair you have dared to practice. The call is simple but profound. Become the mirror. Be the one who pauses, who names, who integrates, who returns, because every act of conscious repair strengthens the thread on which our world hangs. The danger isn't that you see too much. The danger is failing to build a conscious relationship with what you see. Use it as cultural medicine, as constructive leverage, and become part of what is next.